Chapter 1. The narrow, overgrown track finally gave way to a crumbling courtyard, where Aveline brought the expedition vehicle to a halt. Before them loomed Greyfriars, less an estate wing and more a forgotten sarcophagus of stone, its roofline a jagged silhouette against the bruised afternoon sky. Centuries of neglect had allowed ivy to strangle its facade, turning forgotten windows into sunken, sightless eyes. Aveline, a woman whose meticulous nature found solace in order and preservation, felt an uncharacteristic prickle of unease. This was not merely old. It was profoundly, suffocatingly ancient, a place that seemed to actively resent the living. Her small team, 2 junior archivists, moved with an almost reverent quiet, their boots crunching on loose gravel. The air itself felt thick, tasting of damp stone and something else, something metallic and cold that defied identification. Even the ubiquitous dust seemed to cling with a singular tenacity, a layer that implied not just years but millennia of undisturbed slumber. Aveline ran a gloved hand over the carved oak of the grand, mall-like entrance, feeling the decay beneath the grime, the silent protest of petrified wood. Inside, the silence amplified, swallowing the soft shuffle of their steps. The main hall, a cavernous space meant for grandeur, was instead a monument to abandonment. Towering shelves, built for an impossible number of texts, receded into the gloom, choked by cobwebs that hung like tattered shrouds. Every breath seemed to stir the settled particles, creating ghostly motes dancing in the meager shafts of light that pierced the grimy windows. The sheer scale of their task, cataloging centuries of neglected texts and artifacts, pressed down with the weight of the decaying edifice itself. As they began to unpack, the first subtle intrusions began. Not blatant, not yet, but enough to make the hair on the back of Aveline's neck stand up. A strange draft, not a natural current of air, but a colder, more deliberate sigh that wound through the lower stacks, carrying a faint, cloying scent that hinted at mildew and something deeper, something organic and long buried. And then the murmurs. Barely perceptible, like the whisper of brittle parchment, or the groan of ancient timbers settling, yet too rhythmic, too persistent to be mere structural complaint. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a low, guttural thrum that vibrated just beneath the threshold of hearing, hinting at a presence that stirred in the archive's profound depths. Aveline, ever the pragmatist, tried to dismiss it as the building shedding its skin, but the feeling of being watched, of something awakening, was growing too strong to ignore. Chapter 2. The faint, guttural thrum from the previous days seemed to solidify as Aveline and her small team delved deeper into the archive's lower levels. The air grew colder, heavier, clinging to skin and clothes with a chill that felt less like temperature and more like a pervasive damp dread. Here, the light struggled even more, the few bare bulbs casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and warped the already disorienting stacks of forgotten volumes. Dust motes, thicker now, seemed to hang suspended, a curtain between the living and the vast, silent history around them. It was in these deeper, less disturbed sections that they began to uncover the anomalies. Nestled amongst centuries of sermons and ledgers, Aveline discovered a cluster of peculiar, unlabeled folios. Their bindings were not leather or vellum, but a strange, dark material that felt unnervingly organic beneath her gloved fingertips, almost leathery yet too pliable. The paper within was thick, yellowish, covered not with conventional script but disturbing symbols that seemed to writhe and interlock like a fevered dream, alongside fragmented incantations scrawled in an archaic, spidery hand. Each glyph resonated with a chilling, unfamiliar energy that made the hairs on her arms prickle. These finds coincided with an escalating series of unsettling occurrences. Tools meticulously placed would vanish only to reappear across the room, or even in different sections entirely. A stack of meticulously organized manuscripts was found scattered, not as if dropped, but as if deliberately cast aside. And the sounds, once a distant thrum, now intensified. Faint, wet-clicking noises like chitinous limbs shifting would echo from beyond the passages sealed off by heavy, iron-bound doors, sections of the archive deemed too unstable or dangerous to enter. The guttural sounds were deeper now, almost a growl, reverberating through the very stone beneath their feet. Liam, the eager junior archivist, had volunteered for a solo shift in one of these forbidden peripheral sections, claiming he'd found a fascinating, if unstable, series of astronomical charts. Aveline, despite a burgeoning instinct to refuse, had allowed it, admonishing him to be cautious. Hours later, the silence from his section became too profound. His workbench lay abandoned, a half-opened folio splayed, his flashlight a dull glint on the floor. Liam himself was simply gone. No sign of struggle, no overturned shelves, only an unnerving emptiness where moments before there had been the quiet hum of diligent work. Aveline swept the area, a rising panic warring with her disciplined mind. He must have wandered further in, perhaps fallen or been called away by a caretaker she hadn't yet met. She called his name, her voice swallowed by the cavernous expanse, returning only the echo of her own unease. A prickle, cold and sharp, began to fester beneath her practiced calm, a burgeoning certainty that this was no simple accident, and the archive held more than just forgotten texts. Chapter 3. The archive's profound silence, once a welcome companion to diligent work, now pressed in on Aveline with the weight of a burial shroud. Liam was not merely misplaced, he was gone. Days blurred into a frantic, fruitless search, her cries swallowed by the echoing halls. There was no sign of struggle, no overturned furniture, only the chilling absence that gnawed at the edges of her academic resolve. The caretakers, if they existed, remained unseen, their silence as deep as the archives. Her logical mind, her only defense against the creeping dread, found no rational explanation. All that remained was the burgeoning certainty that the peculiar, unlabeled folios she had dismissed as anomalous were, in fact, the key. She retreated to her study, the chill in the air a constant companion, and plunged back into the disturbing glyphs and fragmented incantations. Driven by a tenacious urgency that bordered on obsession, she worked relentlessly, cross-referencing symbols with obscure medieval texts from the archive's most forbidden sections. Texts she now understood were never meant to see the light of day. Slowly, agonizingly, a coherent narrative began to emerge, piecing together a horrifying tapestry of the Greyfriars' lineage. It spoke of generations bound by a series of dark, sacrilegious pacts, forging a covenant with something ancient and ravenous. The texts revealed the existence of the Keeper, a monstrous flesh-eating entity, not merely bound within the archive but integral to its very purpose, to guard forbidden knowledge. Its sustenance, the scrolls whispered in chilling detail, was drawn from those who sought to breach its sacred, or rather profane, trust. Aveline's blood ran cold. Her meticulous preservation work, the very act of cataloging and restoring the crumbling documents, had inadvertently weakened the ancient seals woven into the very fabric of the architecture. Each cleaned page, each mended binding, each restored scroll had chipped away at the arcane barriers meant to contain the beast. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Liam, with his eager curiosity and his solo shift in the forbidden sections, hadn't fallen or wandered off. He had been the Keeper's first taste of freedom, its first meal in centuries. The faint, guttural sounds, the wet clicking from beyond the iron-bound doors, were not mere drafts or structural shifts. They were the stirring of something unspeakably ancient, awakened by their desecration. Liam's disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a hungry prelude. Aveline looked at the deciphered pages, the truth searing her mind, and felt the archive itself awaken around her, no longer a repository of history, but a cage whose door she had unwittingly unlatched. Chapter 4. The air in the scriptorium grew thick, suffocating. It was no longer the chill of neglect, but a profound, malevolent cold that seeped into Aveline's bones. The low thrumming that had been a subtle undercurrent now vibrated through the floorboards, a guttural purr that resonated with a terrible, ancient hunger. The archive was not merely awakening. It was rousing its master, and every dusty page, every creaking beam, seemed to shiver in anticipation. A frantic, muffled cry echoed from deeper within the stacks. Marcus. He was still here, still alive for now. Aveline's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging her onward. She scrambled from the deciphered texts, her mind a whirlwind of fear and a desperate, burgeoning plan. "Marcus," she yelled, her voice thin and reedy against the growing cacophony of the archive. A chilling, wet click answered her, closer now, followed by a sound like tearing fabric and a low, satisfied snarl that vibrated with unnatural hunger. It was everywhere and nowhere, a presence that warped the very air. She found Marcus stumbling from a shadowed alcove, his face ashen, a jagged rip in his jacket sleeve where something had scraped him. His eyes, wide with terror, darted wildly into the gloom behind him. "Aveline, it's not human, there's something moving in the darkness." Before he could say more, a monstrous form detached itself from the deeper shadows, a grotesque symphony of clicking carapace and skeletal limbs, too many of them, shifting with horrifying fluidity. It was enormous, gaunt yet powerful, with elongated, bone-white digits that scraped the floor and ceiling simultaneously. What passed for its face was a nightmare of ancient, chitinous plates, punctuated by multiple, unblinking eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence, and a maw that seemed to unfold in layers, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth slick with something dark and viscous. The scent of ozone and decay, mingled with something sickly sweet, choked them. "Run!" Aveline shrieked, grabbing Marcus's arm. They plunged into the labyrinth of the lower levels, the very passages they had so carefully catalogued now their desperate maze. Behind them, the keeper moved with unnerving speed, its wet clicking reverberating through the shelves, echoing their every terrified step. Books rained down as it scraped past, the fragile texts disintegrating into dust, their ancient knowledge obliterated by the creature's ravenous pursuit. They were trapped in its domain, navigating a deadly dance between survival and the crushing weight of their own terrifying discovery. The air grew colder, heavy with the creature's breath, and Aveline knew, with chilling certainty, that the archive itself was now a throat slowly closing around them. Chapter 5. They stumbled through the suffocating darkness, the air growing thick with dust and the keeper's putrid breath. Marcus gasped, clutching a wound on his arm where a claw had raked him. Behind them, the grotesque symphony of clicking carapace and shifting bone echoed, closer now, a promise of imminent demise. Aveline's eyes, burning with a frantic desperation, scanned the collapsing shelves, searching for anything, a sign, a clue, a last, impossible hope. Then, amidst a cascade of shattered earthenware and calcified human bones, relics of meals long past, she saw it. It was not a lever, nor a switch, but a section of wall, intricately carved with the same arcane symbols she deciphered from the forbidden folios, symbols that pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence. This was it, the ancient mechanism, hidden in plain sight, its purpose a forgotten whisper until now. The keeper lunged, a monstrous blur of skeletal limbs and gnashing maw, its multifaceted eyes fixed on them with unholy hunger. "The wall!" Aveline screamed, shoving Marcus towards it. She slammed her palm onto the central symbol, a cold, smooth stone that hummed beneath her touch. A deep guttural growl ripped from the keeper's throat as it recoiled, momentarily disoriented by the surge of ancient energy. The archive shuddered, the very foundations groaning in protest. Marcus, recovering, pressed his hand to another symbol, his face a mask of primal fear and grim determination. A low, resonant thrum vibrated through the stone, growing in intensity. The keeper, enraged, thrashed against the invisible force field that now shimmered around the glowing symbols, its chitinous plates scraping against the air itself. Dust rained down in thick clouds, momentarily obscuring the beast. Then, with a deafening roar that vibrated through their very bones, a section of the floor, previously unremarkable, began to sink. Not just a small section, but a vast, circular segment, carrying the thrashing keeper down into a newly revealed chasm, a maw within the archive's maw. The creature's frantic snarls grew distant, swallowed by the earth. As the walls above them began to seal, the ancient stone grinding shut with terrifying finality. They scrambled back, collapsing against a still-standing bookshelf as the last rumble faded, leaving an unnerving silence. The cold, suffocating presence of the keeper was gone, replaced by a lingering chill and the stench of decay. They lay there, gasping, their bodies racked, their minds reeling. The ancient seal held, for now, the monstrous hunger contained but not destroyed, merely sleeping in the dark foundations. They had escaped, but the Greyfriars Archive had imprinted itself upon them, its echoes of hunger forever etched into their souls, a silent threat awaiting its next awakening.